Okay, for today's segment, want to discuss an email I got from my friend Nicholas, and he writes, "It's easy to forget that Donald Trump has been a public figure, willingly and aggressively, since 1980. He is the master. It is also very difficult for the political class to admit or understand this, but Donald Trump is the most gifted national politician we have had since Bill Clinton. Until the Dems and the political elite admit and understand this, they will not beat Donald Trump. The visceral hatred is a distraction." Thurgood, agree or disagree? What's your reaction?
So I'm going to agree and disagree. On the latter part, I agree completely that the Democrats need to get their animosity about the incumbent president under control and stay focused on the task at hand, which is to build an alternative platform of initiatives and issues, and as part of that, provide a fair contrast with what President Trump is promoting. On the other hand, on the front end of that observation, I'm not sure I can agree that he's the most gifted politician of our time. I don't feel that his talents for communication, which are suited, admittedly, very well to certain types of television and reality TV and gotcha television, I don't find that those are skills that necessarily make one a talented politician. And I think his inability to push past 50% ever in approval ratings is one indication of that.
Peter?
Well, I think there's two things. One is, his rise to power came virtually unscrutinized. He was a public figure, but not a seriously considered public figure. In New York City, he was always considered a bit of a joke. For instance, in the world of finance, none of the legitimate New York banks would do business with him because he was considered a deadbeat. And I think that his skills were more of a carnival barker during the early days, and he snuck up on a non-attentive Republican field in a very unique situation. So I don't think he's the most skilled politician. I think he relies heavily on the fawning coverage from Fox News and the Murdoch empire. And it's not just Fox News, it's the Murdoch, scandal sheets in the UK. They'll run an unsubstantiated leak. It'll bleed into talk radio in the US. It then bleeds into the mainstream media after Fox and Murdoch's newspapers cover it. So he has a certain leg up in terms of getting his message out. But I don't see him as the most skilled politician. And in terms of the vitriolic dislike, I think the vitriolic dislike is what's going to drive the turnout for Democrats. Turnout was not particularly strong in 2016, not among African Americans. It just was not an election that engendered strong feelings. I think the turnout in 2020 is going to be enormous, and that's what's going to sweep Trump from office and perhaps the Republican Senate.
But don't you think that Trump has been able to read the people to be able to, say what they think when it comes to immigration, when it comes to social issues, and that he has been able to read the American people exceptionally well, maybe better than anybody else who can do so right now?
Well, he's read 42 to 44% of the American people pretty well. He's tapped into, the long-standing undercurrent of racism in our country. When President Obama was reelected to his second term, he really disrupted what was essentially a caste system in the United States. All of a sudden, a person of color was not automatically inferior to whites. And that's the way it had been for 300 years. So I think Donald Trump taps into that group. And then for the kind of conservative Republican, socially moderate type, he's bought them off with enormous tax cuts that have increased their wealth. There was an interesting article in the New Yorker magazine recently, which talked about why wealthy, conservative, but socially moderate Republicans, in this case, Greenwich, Connecticut, which is the most wealthy town in America, why they still support Trump. And it's because it's been good business for them.
Well, Thurgood, what do you think? You think that Biden's going to be able to get the voters that stayed home for Hillary, but who came out for Obama, those 4.4 million voters or so who voted for Obama, but didn't even bother to vote in 2016? Can they come out in 2020?
I think there's enough evidence to show that he's likely to be able to do that, in part because of the president's inability to improve his approval ratings during a national crisis, namely the COVID-19 crisis, which suggests to me that he's been unable to push the swing portion of the country into his corner, or even pull them into his corner. The governors have continued to benefit from that sort of a bump. So the bump was clearly available to leaders who exhibited some strength during this period and some consistent and transparent intelligence in their leadership ability. In addition, I think the other thing that Vice President Biden should take some heart from is the swing from 2016 to the midterm elections that occurred in 2018, where there were significant takebacks on the part of the Democrats, who were moderates, who were able to win back some of the House swing seats in the U.S. House of Representatives and tilt the balance there and put Nancy Pelosi back in the Speaker's chair. So I think that there are several indicators that are already on the table and available to the Biden campaign now. And I also think that there's a fair amount of fatigue with the sort of shenanigans that the president likes to throw out as distractions whenever he finds himself in any kind of a rough patch. I think there's a general fatigue with that sort of monkeying around with the office of the presidency. And I think the last thing is the bloom's off the rose with the kinds of people he's been able to attract to his administration. It's pretty clear that he is not getting the best talent that the country has to offer, and we're facing some serious challenges that warrant the very best minds and talent that we have available.
So, final question, Peter, and Thurgood, is it enough, the visceral dislike, even hatred for Donald Trump, for all of the things that he hasn't been able to do, to get the Democrats to come out to vote and get the independents to come out and vote in the numbers they need to vote? Or does Joe Biden need to excite the base more? Can he do that through his vice presidential selection or otherwise? Or is this just going to be about beating Trump and not electing Biden?
I think his vice presidential choice is going to be important, but it's going to be primarily important that he doesn't screw it up. You know, he needs to pick someone who's already been vetted, I believe, so we don't spend a month or 6 weeks going over some new candidate's background. We need someone who's been in the public arena and has already faced that scrutiny. And I think he's going to play a relatively safe campaign and count on, you know, the energy that is out there to throw Trump out. I don't think there's any question that Biden is going to win the popular vote, and he'll win it more than Hillary won it by. The question is he going to win it in the key states? And that's still up for grabs.
They're good.
Yeah, can't improve on what Peter said, although I would just underscore that last point. The three primary target states, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, are crucial, and we can't afford to misplay any of our strategy in those states. but there are additional states we should be looking to, particularly Arizona, where there's an interesting Senate race that could also impact the outcome of that state on the national front. I will, as a partisan Democrat, be hoping for a victory, but I also think it's important, given the way elections have been run here in recent cycles, to make sure, to the best we can, that it is a decisive victory, not only to provide President-elect Biden with the kind of mandate he needs to make some real progress the first couple of years of the administration, but also on a more narrow level to make sure that we don't find ourselves in recount battles or in court trying to resolve what happened on election day.
Well, that sounds like a good. Go ahead, Peter.
One last thing, Steve, is that probably one of the most critical tactical decisions that Democrats have to make is to keep their eye on the ball. They cannot be seduced by these, every quadrennial rumors that, if we just spent a little more money, we could take Texas. Well, we're not going to take Texas. And it's likely the same thing is true in Florida. We're not going to take Florida. Let's focus on the states that we can win, zero in on them, and hammer them. That's it.
Yeah. I would guess this time we're going to spend more than 0 days in Wisconsin as a Democratic Party in the general election, which we did not do last time. All right, well, great talking again. We'll pick up another topic for next week. Thanks, Thurgood. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.